Hey, Superhuman. Today I have a guest coming to us from Queensland. His name is Bill Lee-Emery. Bill has been interviewed on BBC Radio London, ABC Radio Australia, and Australian Channels 7, 9, and 10. He's been in The Age and various other magazines and international podcasts. With over 40 years of experience working with national and international corporations and businesses, world-class skydivers, cyclists, triathletes, golfers, and thousands of individuals who want to succeed in life, Bill has distilled his knowledge and experience into a series of books that have just one goal: to help people become better versions of themselves. So if that sentiment alone does not encapsulate the guest here today, you're in the wrong place. But Bill, welcome to Summon Your Superhuman.
Thank you so much. And I love the title, like Superhuman, because, a lot of us play a smaller game than what we really can. But if we really touch into that, highly creative part of us, then ordinary people can do extraordinary things. So I think superhuman, I think, is really apt.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I guess connected us was your latest book, which is How to Be Bulletproof from Criticism. So tell me a bit about that. It's such an intriguing title in itself. Like, what was the intent or the idea? How did that come about?
So for the last 8 or 9 years, I've been facilitating and participating in men's groups in Australia. And I've run a wide variety of different programs. And one day I was just sitting at the lunch table listening to men talking, casual conversations. And I just was noticing a theme that a lot of men were saying that they have a difficulty in dealing with criticism or feedback sometimes. And I'm going, okay, I have some personal experience with that. And I've got some ways of dealing with it. So I thought I'll run a workshop. So the next year I ran a workshop that was very well received. I then turned it into a program on Udemy. And so I've got like nearly 3 hours of video. And I was sitting meditating, it was about a year ago, thinking, so what's next? In my era of life, what am I going to do next? And a book emerged. And I thought, well, what am I going to write on? Everything's been written about, like blah, blah, blah. And I'm going, Bill, you've done a course. You've done a whole bunch of videos. Here's the next book. So I then transcribed the videos into written word, which is not an easy thing because there's a whole bunch of editing that you have to do. And it really touched on an early experience I had. I've been facilitating programs for nearly 40 years. But in my early career, I was teaching to a group of highly credentialed academics, educators. So most of them had PhDs in education, or at least a master's degree. And I don't have a degree in education. So I was kind of like, but I was teaching them the stuff they didn't know. Yeah. And it was in the second week of an 8-week program. And I was talking about a particular model of human behavior. And I made what I thought was an innocuous, innocent comment. And I just said that I didn't think that guilt was a good way of getting kids to do things. And I still don't think it's a good way of getting kids to do things. And this was a group of special education teachers. So I assumed, or compassionate, all these kind of things. And it was true in 19 out of 20 of the people in the room. But for one person, it was I had just stepped on her foot and she launched into the most vitriolic personal attack I've ever experienced in my life. No one has come anywhere near the Scud missiles that she was sending at me. But I'd learned a couple of things. I've only been trained for 5 years, but I'd learned a couple of things that helped me to keep me centered. So I didn't crumble, which would have been very easy in that kind of circumstance. I didn't attack her back, which is part of what I wanted to do. You mess with me, I'll mess with you kind of stuff. But that wouldn't have been, if I'd have done that, if there's any flavor of that, there would have been 20 people against me. I don't like those kind of odds. So if it was a chess game, I had it in checkmate in 2 moves, 2 questions. And so as I delivered the second question, and she basically just shut up. On the inside of me, I'm going, yeah, I'm having this big party. I'm dancing up and down. On the outside, I'm very calm, very, very professional. But I go, wow, what happened? What did I do? So all this internal dialogue was going on. And later on, I was able to debrief and basically put what I'd done in that circumstance down in a sequence where, I could share it with other people. And basically, criticism would come from two places, either from other people, as it was in her, or the one that's probably the most insidious is the internal critic, which often waits till you're tired, till you're exhausted, and it whispers in your ear, wanting to make you think you can do this, and So basically, I took all those experiences and all the things that I'd learned from my training and put into a book, made it very easy to read, like a 2-3 hour read. And it's people that read it tell me, I couldn't wait to get to the next chapter, and I couldn't wait. And that's because the way I crafted the book is I wanted to make it a page turner. So it keeps people interested, and it's my 5th book, and it's the one I'm the most proudest of. The one that I just go, wow, this is just very well edited. I had a professional editor that helped me craft it, going to take that sentence out, change that, so kind of take my raw ideas and turn them into something that I think is worth reading.
Definitely. Something that springs to mind. I mean, I can obviously see, like I envision already, like that moment that you spoke about, being in this environment where you're teaching, and then someone sort of comes at you, like you said, unexpectedly. How do you compose yourself in that moment to even try to come up with a clear question to return back?
Well, the first thing I had to do was to, you may know about belly breathing, like in yoga when you breathe down into your belly, and I'd learned about that before. So one of the first things I did is I just put my hand on my belly and started to breathe into my belly, because I had to calm myself down. I couldn't afford to be in a stressed state. So that's the first thing I did. And the model that I've just been talking about is called Transactional Analysis. It's been around since the 60s. And very briefly, it talks about the parental part of us, the adult and the little child part. And the parental part has got the critical parent and the nurturing parent. And she was definitely coming from her critical parent. You should be doing this, and the pointer finger and all that kind of vitriol that comes from the critical part of the parent. And so the child part of me was feeling vulnerable, threatened, attacked. So I had to calm the little kid inside of me that was going, oh no, well, help, and calm and emotionally support myself. So I'm breathing, thinking rapidly as to, people only attack somebody else if they've got something to defend. If they don't have anything to defend, there's nothing to attack. So my rational thinking was going, what is she, what have I just exposed? Why is she attacking me? What's underneath that? So all these things are going on all at the same time. I'm breathing into my belly. I'm emotionally supporting myself. My adult is thinking rapidly as to, and why she's still, screaming and yelling abuse and all the rest of that stuff. So I knew eventually that she'd have to stop. A day later, 5 minutes later, she would have to stop. So I'm just continuing to emotionally support myself. And that was really the crux of me saving my dignity and basically being able to think clearly. Because if I started to panic, then when people panic, they don't think clearly.
Correct.
So I had to have some really kind of clear boundaries within myself as to what I did. So when she finally stopped talking, I asked her 2 questions, and those 2 questions just shut her up. And as I asked the second question, I could see 19 little smiles from the other people, quietly. They weren't going to be too extravagant about it. But it was like, yeah, you got it. Like if anyone in that room was the critical parent, it was her. So what I had just done, I had exposed, I'd given common language to her peers as to how she showed up in life. So that's why she was attacking me. She wanted to shut me down because I just exposed her way of dealing with kids and as a human being. So So that happened 35 years ago. And if I met that woman now, I'd give her a big hug, because I have told this story to countless people. And how to deal with, someone attacking you. You have to be able to emotionally support yourself. You have to learn some of those things. Otherwise, you'll just get steamrolled.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the breath work and dealing in that, because most people be like a deer in the headlights when someone sort of comes at them like that. So composure through breathing, and
Yes.
really trying to identify, I guess, the place of which the person who is coming with you at you, or with, to you,
Yeah.
their criticism, what is the root of that really, and not to take that personally, I suppose. It's also cool.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. One of the question I often have from people is, well, I take things to heart. If someone says something, I take things, how can I stop making everything personal and taking things to heart? And there's literally, if you listen to our language, I'll just use this pen. So I've got a pen in front of me, and if this is the Scud missile, or the criticism, and it's going towards my heart, when people take things to heart, that's literally what they do. They take this criticism and they put it really close to their heart. So when someone criticizes what they've done, the pen, for example, then they'll just point their finger and it just slips a little bit and it goes right into them. In other words, they don't separate what they have done from who they are. They make them the same, and they're different.
Yeah.
So when people go, oh, okay, so if someone, let's say, no, you probably won't do this, but let's say you were to call me a goose. Now, there's a couple of default programs I have in my head. The first is the difference between a fact and an opinion. So coming back to this pen, if I say to you, so Ria, what do you think of this pen? And you say, well, that's a lousy pen, or it's a beautiful pen. Both those are opinions.
Yep.
They're your subjective view of this particular pen. It's actually purple and it's got some writing on it. That's a fact that anyone can verify. So if I'm not able to distinguish the difference between a fact and an opinion, when someone says you're a goose to me, or any other words, I go, oh, wow, maybe I am. And if I'm not able to work out, is that your opinion or is that a fact? Because it's useful, especially in a professional arena, to be able to take feedback, to be able to take criticism. Otherwise, how can we ever grow and expand and have some kind of self-awareness that what we're doing as to whether it will work or not? So part of that was me also, when she was saying all these things to me, is going, is this a fact or is it an opinion? It was clearly her opinion. So then the other thing I have to put into this is, whose opinion about me am I going to honor? Hers or mine?
Yeah.
It's going to be mine.
Yeah.
I've been around me a lot longer than she has. And I would discuss her opinions about me. So I have to know who I am as a human being. And I have to be able to back myself. And not in a distorted, egotistical, exaggerated way, but more in a humble, a humble kind of, this is who I am. Knowing yourself is like real key. So there's a couple of things that go around my head as to when someone does attack me. And I have to say, this is the most divisive era that I've ever lived in. Like the last 2 years, family member against family member, community against them and us, them and us, them and us. And it's rare that you can have people from different sides of the arguments being able to speak with each other without condemning the other, but really listening deeply to the concerns, whatever the others have. And so being able to be bulletproof and to learn how to do that, because all these things are learnable skills that I learned from somebody else. I didn't make them up. I learned from somebody else. Sure, I put them in my own language, my own stories, but basically this has been around for a long, long time. So I just happen to be the vehicle, if you like, for this particular iteration of these kind of principles that are timeless.
Definitely. And that's one of the reasons why, like I said, the title of your book attracted me because of criticism being such a prominent, it really is at the forefront, especially right now. And so I was just even thinking about, again, like that scenario where you're confronted with, this criticism, and you compose yourself and breathe through, and you returned with a question, and even just the idea of returning with a question, it's almost like trying to turn the mirror back upon her to be like, well, why are you actually why are you saying this to me, actually?
Yeah, like, where are you coming from? What's all this about? And actually, interestingly, after the class, one of the other participants said to me that she'd just gone through a very bitter divorce. And so men weren't her favourite human beings at the time, and she felt that I was going to be a good target.
Yeah.
I wasn't. But interesting enough, right at the end of the 8 weeks, I think it was, in 6 weeks, when we did a roundup and asked everyone what they'd got from the program, and all credit to her, she stayed for the rest of the program. She didn't, walk and never come back. She stayed, which considering things I was talking about, I thought was pretty brave. And she was, of course, was the last person to respond, and everyone's going, "What's she going to say?" And she said, in a kind of quiet voice, she said, "I've come to realize that there's a lot of things that I need to learn." And I'm going, far out. Good on you to have the awareness to realize that your way of doing the world is just something that you learned from your parents, from whoever, and you've incorporated that, and you haven't been able to separate and go, what's the good stuff and what's the stuff I need to drop? And as human beings, we're influenced by our family, whoever it is who brings up. So their values, their ways of being in the world, basically we absorb those without any discernment. We just take them on board. That's the way the world is. And I saw a cartoon on social media the other day where it had like a grandfatherly person, admonishing their child, and that parent now was admonishing the next generation. And it said, I think of the Bible, that the sins of the father will be passed down 7 generations, which means there's stuff. I didn't become a parent until I was 40, but I was so blessed that I did a whole bunch of parent training before I got to be a parent. So I got to be aware of some good things to pass down and some rubbish things not to do. But somewhere along the line, someone has to go, this concept, this idea just doesn't work anymore. It's not useful. It's actually damaging. So how can I change my behavior or how I hold this particular value, whatever it might be, to be more humane, more compassionate, more generous with who we are as a human being, more superhuman, if you like, in that kind of full emotional gamut of what we can be as human beings.
Yeah. And that brings it around. I mean, you mentioned a few things there. It's important to be aware of oneself and to be, comfortable and aware of oneself. And so when we talk about personal criticism, so that's the other spectrum, it's how is it best to tackle? Well, you said you've had an opportunity to learn from your own experiences and what you've seen. So it's like most people default to harsh criticism of self. Oh, yes. You idiot, or you,
indeed,
and what would you suggest is a better practice instead of just calling yourself names?
Yeah. Okay. And that's actually, it's a really important question. And because I've written the book and I'm having conversation with the people, a lot of people go, yeah, my internal critic is just hammering me all day long. And so I ask them, if they've got any kids, and if they say yes, it's okay. So when your child is like 2 or younger and they're learning to walk, what kind of parent are you? Are you encouraging, or do you just say, "Come on, get up, you fool, we've seen us walk"? And would you do that to your child? They go, "No, that's inhumane." Okay, well, and people are often very compassionate with others, and they are shit at being compassionate towards themselves. They know how to do the skill of compassioning, but somewhere along the line, they haven't gone, "Hey, should I do this with myself?" And You know, when some are being self-critical. So here's a story, an analogy. So why do parents, for example, nag their kids, especially teenagers, to do their homework? What do you think?
From my parents wanted me to do well in school because they didn't get an opportunity to do well in school.
Okay, so why do they want you to do well in school?
Because both of them actually didn't end up being able to finish school because they couldn't afford to finish school. So education was very important to them.
Okay, so why should they care if you went to school or not, or did well at school? Who cares?
Because they thought that education was the only way that I can succeed in life.
Okay, so let's say you get an education. Why should they care? So they want you to do well in life?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, why?
So that I can have a better life than they did.
So why should they care?
Because they love me.
Yes. That's the key thing. So parents nag their kids because they can see if they don't, get good grades at school, you may not go to university, you may not get the job that you want, you may not have the lifestyle that you want, you may not have an enjoyable life. So they come from a place of love, but their delivery stinks.
Yeah.
You nag someone from your critical parent, you should be doing this. Any shoulds, like when I've worked with people and they say, I should be losing weight and I should stop smoking, or I should, if there's a should in there, the other part is the rebellious part of us that says, oh yeah, you tell me what to do and I'll do the exact opposite.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there's a really interesting one class I did many, many years ago on the Sunshine Coast when I was living there. I was teaching weight management. And a friend of mine was doing all the biology and she's an naturopath, doing all those things. And I was really doing the mental and the emotional stuff. And I was talking about this model of parent, adult, and child. And she realized the reason that she was overeating was her rebellious response, unconscious rebellious response to her own internal critic saying, stop doing that. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. So she thought, oh yeah, you watch. And just, and so when she realized that, she just changed in an instant. Mm-hmm. So we have to be aware of what's underneath the criticism. So one of the things that I've just started is a new program. It's going to be a workshop on how to deal with your inner critic and really to transform it into your best ally. Mm-hmm. Because your critic is never going to go away. But if we don't understand what's underneath it, then we can't get to the positive intention that critical part is doing for us. If we can get to that positive intention underneath that behavior, then we go, oh yeah, of course I want this. Of course I want to do well at school. Of course I want a happy life. And if you're nagging me to do my homework right now, that's going to help me do that, hey, I'll do my homework. But because I've got a bigger reason. Mm. But it's when we just don't look at the behavior, what's underneath it, then we can get trapped into the rigmarole and the angst and the dynamics of that, rather than going, the reason my parents nagging me is because they actually love me. A 14-year-old going, my parents love me. They're nagging me. They care about me. They go, no, bloody parents, I want to nag. Whatever it might be. So it's understanding that. And I was talking with someone the other day and she was stuck. And so we kind of played around with why she was stuck. And one was her internal critic was just beating herself up. And I asked her, I said, my sense of you is you're a pretty compassionate human being. She said, yes, I am. I said, but so how are you going with being compassionate towards yourself? And she just, I don't. And it's exactly the same pattern. So she hasn't explored why it is that she does, not so much why, but it's actually the better question is how. How do I become more compassionate to myself than the shit I'm dumping on myself 24 hours a day? And so part of that is, I explained more about this book, but I want to give you this that I learned many, many years ago. And when we do something, often, for example, I've done a lot of presentations. And in the early days, I'd finish a presentation and workshop. And as soon as I get off the stage, I'd say, you didn't do this well, that was a mess, and you mess that up. And I'd reiterate all the things I've done wrong. And one of the general principles is whatever we give attention to, we'll do more of. Mm-hmm. So if I want to be healthy, I need to pay attention to the things I'm doing to be healthy.
Yeah.
But if all I'm paying attention to is all the wrong things that I'm doing, then I'll be drawn towards that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I started to notice, and this was taught to me by one of my mentors, that's I mentioned a lot in the book. And he said, when you do something, no matter what it is, he said, ask yourself these two questions, and your listeners, you're free to write these two questions down. And the first question is, what do you like about what you've just done? When my daughter was young, she'd bring a painting to me and she'd say, Daddy, what do you think of my painting? And I know that she's actually asking a couple of questions, one conscious and the other one unconscious. Mm-hmm. So I would say to her, so darling, what do you like about what you've just done? And she'd say, I like the reds and the blues and the greens and shapes, whatever. And then I'd ask her, so if you were to do it again, what would you change or do differently? So that's the second question. What would you change or do differently? And she'd say, well, I'd have more of this there, or I'll do this, or whatever it might be. So I've now brought into her awareness her strengths, the first thing, and the things that she can change or do differently. Notice that there's no criticism in those two questions. There is just awareness, expanding awareness of something. So then I'd ask her, so first of all, I'd get her opinion about what she's done. Yeah. Then I'd ask her, so would you like my opinion about what you've just done? And when she was younger, she would say, yeah. When she got older, she'd say no. I'm quite okay with that, especially as a teenager. So I'd say, I like this, and I would focus on things that I was genuinely liked. I never made anything up, because that would be disrespectful to her. And then I'd say, well, what you could do, or what I might do, whatever, and I'd try this. So I'd give her some parameters, some external feedback as to my opinion, and I would frame it up as my opinion, so she was aware of that. And then so she can make her own internal adjustments. But I wanted her to start to embody an internal framework of when she does something, to notice what she does right first. Because whatever you notice, you'll do more of. And then secondly, in an emotional way, go, well, if I was to do it again, I could do this, this, and this. So, and I've carried on that habit personally since, well, for 40 years when I first learned doing that. And now, when she's in her teenage years, and she would write something for school, and she'd send it to me. So what do you think of this, Dad? And I'd say, well, I'd actually ask her, what do you think first? Get her opinions first. Then I'd give mine if she wanted them. And sometimes I noticed that sometimes I'd ask her if she wanted my opinion or not. And sometimes she'd say, no, thanks. I just want a sounding board, and I'll be fine with that. Then as she got into university and her essays were more complicated, we'd have a good discussion about that. And as I was writing more books, I'd send bits to her and say, tell me your opinion about this. This is what I like. This is what I was tell me. And that's, I know from her behavior now, she's 32, that behavior is embedded. And that's something I learned a long time ago, and it's been such a blessing to me. And not only to her, but to a lot of other people that I've expressed this particular idea to. And I didn't make it up. Someone told me, and I'm just happily passing it on.
That's wonderful. I love that. And yes, it is 100% true, because often criticism is taken as a negative, or that person criticized what I was doing, or that person told me what was wrong with me and what was wrong with what I was doing. And they really take it so negatively. So when it comes to, I guess, your own criticisms or even asking for it, it is important to try to express the opportunity for it to better improve you. So whether it's from someone or from yourself, it's an opportunity for improvement.
Indeed, yeah. And if you think about, as human beings, we are always evolving, we're always changing.